My sister-in-law's minivan was parked across two spaces in the gravel drive, blocking the spot I'd graded for my dad's truck. I noticed before I noticed anything else. Before the lake. Before the cedar siding I'd picked out in April. Before my father standing on the porch with his shoulders pulled up to his ears like he was trying to disappear inside his own jacket. It was supposed to be a surprise. The whole thing. 42 years my parents had been married, and the only vacation they'd ever taken together was a long weekend in Branson in 1998 because my brother had won a radio contest. My mother kept the brochure in a kitchen drawer for 2 decades. I used to watch her smooth it out with her thumb when she thought nobody was looking. So when I started making real money, the kind where you don't flinch at the gas pump anymore, I bought 11 acres on a quiet finger of water in northern Wisconsin. Pine trees, a loon nest at the south end of the inlet, a small dock that would need to be rebuilt, which I did. I bought the land in 2021. I broke ground in 2023. I closed out the punch list in February of this year. $478,000, all in. By the time I'd hung the last set of curtains and stocked the pantry with my mother's brand of coffee. My mother, who has been drinking the same off-brand coffee from a green canister since I was in kindergarten. I told them I was taking them up north for their anniversary dinner. That's all I said. I drove up 2 days early to turn on the water, run the heat, put fresh sheets on the beds, fill the fridge with the things I knew they liked, and a few things I thought they might try. My mother had never eaten a fresh oyster in her life. I bought oysters. I figured, why not? 42 years. I want to tell you something about my older sister before I tell you the rest, because the comments people leave on stories like this always ask the same question. They want to know if she was always like this, if there were signs, if the family knew. The answer is yes, and the answer is also no. She is not the kind of person who screams in restaurants. She doesn't post unhinged things on Facebook. She volunteers at her church. She brings casseroles. If you met her at a baby shower, you'd think she was the nicest woman you talked to all afternoon, and you'd mean it. The cruelty in her is the kind that needs a long runway. It needs context and history, and the slow accumulation of small permissions that nobody noticed they were giving. The first permission was when she was 19 and our grandmother died, and she came home from the funeral with my grandmother's jewelry box. Nobody had said she could have it. She just took it. And our mother, exhausted and grieving, said, "Well, you were always close to her." That was the first one. There have been hundreds since. My husband and I have a daughter. She is 7. My sister has not sent her a birthday card in 3 years. I mention this only because it matters later. So I drove up to the cottage on a Thursday. My parents were coming Saturday. I had Friday to finish the last few things. Putting fresh flowers in the bedroom, double-checking the dock for splinters, hanging the framed photograph I'd had restored. It was a picture of my parents at the courthouse the day they got married in 1983. My mother in a blue dress because she'd thought a white dress would be presumptuous. My father with his hair still dark. I'd had it cleaned up and matted in a thick wooden frame, and I'd hung it over the fireplace, which I built from local stone because my dad has loved fieldstone since he was a boy on his uncle's farm. I was 36 hours into being the happiest I'd been in years. Then on Friday afternoon, my mother called and said very quietly, "Honey, your sister is coming with us tomorrow." I don't know how she found out about the trip, but she did, and her husband is driving us. There was a long pause. "Is that okay?" I sat down on the floor of the kitchen I had designed for her. I sat down because my legs would not hold me. I said, "Mom, did you tell her anything?" She said, "I told her we were going somewhere nice for our anniversary, that's all." I swear to you, I didn't sleep that night. I drove back to my hotel in town because I didn't want to be at the cottage when they all arrived. I needed to come in fresh. I needed to walk in like a host, not like a woman waiting to be ambushed in her own home. But I also did something else that night. I went to my laptop and I opened the folder. The folder my attorney and I had put together 15 years ago, back when I first started making money, and my husband, fiance at the time, said something that has saved me 100 different ways since. He said, "Your sister's going to be a problem your whole life. You should build the fence before she shows up at the gate." So, I built the fence. And then I built it again, every 5 years, with updated documents. The cottage was held in an irrevocable trust I had created in 2009, long before there was a cottage to put in it. The trust had 3 beneficiaries: my mother, my father, and my daughter, in that order. The trustee was a fiduciary in Minneapolis, not me, not anyone in my family. The trust deeds specified that the property could not be sold, rented, mortgaged, transferred, or assigned in any form during the lifetime of either of my parents. Upon their passing, the property would convert to a residual trust for my daughter to be released to her at age 30. Any attempt by any party, including me, including my parents, including the beneficiaries themselves, to encumber, list, lease, or otherwise commercialize the property would trigger an automatic clause invalidating that party's standing in the trust. I had paid the property taxes for 15 years on a parcel I didn't own yet, just to establish a documented chain of intent. My husband used to laugh at me. He'd say, "Babe, you're going to die of paperwork before anyone gets to do anything to you." And I'd say, "That's the goal." I printed the relevant pages. I put them in a leather portfolio. I put the portfolio in my car. Then I tried to sleep, and I didn't. Saturday morning, I drove out to the cottage at 9. The plan had been to meet at noon. I wanted an hour of quiet first. I wanted to walk the property one more time and remind myself why I'd done all of this, so that when my sister arrived, I would not be a woman in shock. I'd be a woman who had already grieved and was now operating from the other side of it. When I pulled in, the minivan was there. 3 hours early. I sat in my car for a minute. I called my husband. He picked up on the first ring like he'd been waiting. I said, "They're already here." He said, "Bring the folder in. Don't leave it in the car. Don't put it down. Carry it like it's your purse." I love that man. I love him so much. I got out. I took the folder. I walked up the gravel path that I had personally helped lay, because the landscaper had been a friend doing me a favor, and I had wanted to feel the stones under my hands. My father was on the porch. He saw me coming and he tried to smile, and his mouth wouldn't do it. His hands were shaking. My father is 71 years old, and the last time I saw his hands shake was at my grandfather's funeral in 2014. He came down the steps and he hugged me too tight and he whispered, "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I didn't know. I didn't know what to do." I said, "Where's Mom?" He said, "Inside, with them." I went inside. My sister was standing in the middle of the great room I had designed around the view of the lake. She had a glass of wine in her hand, my wine, from the rack I had stocked. She was wearing one of those puffy vest things you see in catalogs, and she was smiling. Not a real smile. The smile. Her husband, let's call him what my father calls him, which is that man, was at the kitchen island with his laptop open. He had a phone propped against a coffee mug and a measuring tape on the counter. He was on a video call with someone. He glanced up when I walked in, and he didn't stop the call. My mother was on the couch, very small, with her hands folded in her lap, the way she sits when she's at the doctor and they're telling her something she doesn't want to hear. I said, "Hi, everyone." My sister floated over to me and put her free hand on my arm. "Oh my God," she said. "This place is incredible. I had no idea you were going to do something like this. We are so impressed." I looked at her hand on my arm. I looked at her face. I said, "How did you find out we were coming up here?" She did the laugh. The little tinkling laugh. "Oh, you know, Mom, she can't keep a secret," my mother said from the couch, very softly. I told her we were going out to dinner. My sister's hand tightened on my arm for just a second, and then she let go. The man at the island finished his call. He stood up. He came over to where I was standing, and he extended his hand like we were at a Rotary luncheon. He said, "Listen, I know this is a lot to walk in on, but we need to have a quick family conversation." I did not shake his hand. I said, "Where are my dad's shoes?" Everyone looked at me. My father, behind me, said, "What?" I said, "Dad, where are your shoes? Your work shoes. The ones with the orange laces." My father said slowly, "I left them by the door." I said, "They're not by the door." My sister said, "Honey, can we focus?" I walked past her. I walked into the mudroom I had designed so that my father would have a bench to sit on while he changed his shoes, because his back has been bad since 2017 and he can't bend over the way he used to. The bench was there. His shoes were not there. There was a pair of women's hiking boots and a man's loafer I didn't recognize. I came back into the great room. I said, "Where are my father's shoes?" The man at the island said, "We moved some things around. We were going to talk to you about that." My sister said, "We've been thinking. You know how Mom and Dad's house in Eau Claire is too big for them now. 3 bedrooms, all those stairs, it doesn't make sense for them anymore." She gestured around the cottage. This is perfect. One floor, easy access. The lake. They can be here and we can use the Eau Claire house. We have 3 kids. My oldest is starting high school. We need the space. It just makes sense. I looked at her. I said, "You moved my dad's shoes. We were tidying. You were measuring." She smiled. "Sweetheart, we need to be practical." The man at the island said, "We've already talked to a property manager. There's a vacation rental market up here that's basically untapped. Dad and mom could come up 2 weekends a month, and the rest of the time, it's pure income. Family asset. Everyone benefits." He pointed at my father. My father, standing in the doorway with his hands at his sides. He pointed at him like he was pointing at a piece of furniture, and he said, "This is a family asset now. We need to start treating it like one." I want to tell you what happened in my body in that moment, because the people who write these stories never tell you what happens in your body. My ears went hot. My tongue went numb. There was a pressure behind my eyes that felt like crying but wasn't crying. It was something older than crying. It was the thing under the crying. It was the thing under the crying. I said very calmly, "Did you list it?" The man looked at me. I said, "Did you list it? On a rental site? Did you take photos and list it?" He hesitated. My sister said, "We were just exploring options." I said, "Did you list it?" He said, "We have a draft listing. We haven't published it yet. We were going to discuss it with you today." I said, "Show me." He said, "What?" I said, "Show me the draft on your laptop, the one open on that kitchen island." He didn't move. I walked over to the island. I turned the laptop toward me. It was open to a property management portal. Photographs of the cottage. Photographs they had taken that morning of my mother's bedroom with her suitcase still half unpacked on the bed. They had photographed her suitcase. They had photographed her suitcase. They had photographed the kitchen where I had stocked her coffee. They had photographed the framed wedding photo over the fireplace and listed it as a charming local touch. $850 a night, 3-night minimum. I felt my father come up behind me. He saw the screen. He made a sound I had never heard him make. It was not a word. I said, "Mom." She looked up from the couch. I said, "Mom, do you want to live here?" She said, "Honey, do you want to live here? In this house, with Dad? The two of you? Yes or no?" She said, "Yes." "Do you want to sell your house in Eau Claire?" "No." "Do you want to rent this house to strangers?" "No, honey, no." I said, "Dad." He said, "Dad." He said, "No." I turned to my sister. I said, "Sit down." She didn't. She said it, "Sit down." She didn't. I said it again. "Sit down." She said it. She sat. I put the leather portfolio on the kitchen island. I opened it. I took out the first set of documents. I said, "This is the trust agreement for this property. It was executed in 2009. It was funded in 2021 when I closed on the land. The cottage and the 11 acres it sits on are held by the Lakeshore Family Trust, of which the trustee is an independent fiduciary in Minneapolis named in the document on page 4. The beneficiaries are listed on page 6. They are our mother, our father, and my daughter. You are not a beneficiary. You have never been a beneficiary. You will never be a beneficiary." I turned the page. I said, "This is the clause that governs commercial use. The property cannot be sold, rented, leased, mortgaged, or otherwise commercialized during the lifetime of either of our parents. Not by them, not by me, not by Minnie. If our parents wish to allow family members to stay here as guests, they can. They cannot grant a tenancy. They cannot collect rent. They cannot transfer the property. The trust forbids it." I turned the page. I said, "This is the survivorship clause. Upon the passing of both of our parents, the property converts to a residual trust for my daughter. She inherits it at 30. Between now and then, the trustee maintains the property and any costs are paid from a trust-funded escrow I established in 2022. There is no scenario in which the property reverts to the broader family. There is no scenario in which you or your husband or your children have any claim on this house. Ever." My sister's smile was gone. She was very still. I turned the page. I said, "And this is the part you're going to want to listen to. This is the anti-encumbrance clause. If any party, beneficiary, family member, agent acting on behalf of a beneficiary, attempts to list, lease, encumber, or in any way commercialize this property without trustee authorization, that party is permanently barred from the property. They cannot enter. They cannot stay as a guest. They cannot be invited. The trustees required by the document to enforce that bar. I looked at her husband. I said, you took photographs of this house and uploaded them to a property management portal with the intent of listing this house for rent. You did that this morning. There's a time-stamped record of it on the laptop on my counter. That is, by the language of this document, an attempted commercialization. I looked at her. I said, you participated. You drove him here. You are listed as a co-applicant on the property management portal. I just saw it on the screen. The man started to say something. I held up my hand. I have never held up my hand to a man like that in my life. I held it up and he stopped talking. I said, the trust is enforced by an attorney in Minneapolis named Mr. Pham. I called him on Friday night. He has a copy of the screenshots my husband took from your portal at 8:47 this morning, which my husband captured because I asked him to start monitoring the property's online presence after Mom called me. Mr. Pham has filed a notice with the trustee. The notice will be acted on today. My sister said, what does that mean? I said, it means you are not coming back. You are not staying here. You are not invited to family gatherings here. When our parents host Thanksgiving, you will not be at this table. When my daughter has her birthday at this dock, you will not be at this dock. The trust is the law of this property, and the trust has spoken. The man said, this is insane. You can't just. I said, I can. I did. It's done. The paperwork was filed before you finished your coffee. He picked up his laptop. He closed it. He stood there holding it like he didn't know where to put it. My sister said, what about the boys? What about your nephews? They've never even seen this place. I said, they are welcome at this house when our parents invite them. Our parents, not you. The trust permits the beneficiaries to invite minor relatives as guests. When the boys turn 18, they can come on their own. Until then, our mother or our father has to extend the invitation. I will not stand in the way of that. But you do not get to use your children as a key to a door I'm closing on you. She stood up. She walked over to the kitchen island. She looked at the documents. She said, why are you doing this to me? I said, I'm not doing this to you. You did this. I'm just the one who saw it coming. She said, we're family. I said, yes, and family is the only people in the world who can do this kind of damage. That's why I built the fence. She started to cry. The crying was not real. I have known my sister for 39 years and I know the difference. The crying was the last move. My mother got up from the couch. She walked over to me and she put her hand on my back and she said to my sister, you need to go now. My father said from the doorway, please put my shoes back where you found them before you leave. The man went into the mudroom and came back with my father's work boots with the orange laces. He set them by the door. He did not look at any of us. They left. The minivan crunched out of the gravel and turned on to the county road, and the sound of it faded. And then there was just the lake and the wind in the pines and a loon calling somewhere I couldn't see. My mother went to the couch and she sat down and she put her face in her hands and she cried in a way I had not heard since my grandmother died. My father walked over to the window. He stood there for a long time. Then he said without turning around, can I see the trust again? I brought it to him. He sat down on the leather chair by the window and he read it. The whole thing. All 28 pages. It took him almost an hour. I made coffee. I put a mug next to him. He drank it without looking at it. When he was done, he closed the folder. He looked at me. His eyes were wet and his mouth was set. He said, how long have you known? I said, about her? 25 years. About this exact thing? Since Mom called yesterday. He said, why didn't you tell us about the trust, about all of this? I said, because if I told you, you'd tell her. Not on purpose, but she's your daughter, and you love her. And she would have asked the right questions, and you would have answered them, because that's who you are. And she would have figured out how to get around it. Or she would have started earlier. Or she would have done something worse. The only way the fence works is if she doesn't know it's there until she's already walked into it. He was quiet a long time. Then he said, your grandfather built a fence like that for your grandmother, after his brother. He shook his head. I never asked him about it. I should have asked him about it. I said, Dad, I want to tell you something. I want you to hear me. He looked at me. I said, this house is yours and Mom's, for the rest of your lives. You don't have to ask permission for anything. You can paint a wall any color you want. You can rip up the dock and build a new one. You can fill the freezer with anything. You can invite anyone you want, except for two people. You know who those two people are? Everyone else, anyone, anytime. The door is open. You are not a guest in this house. You live here. He nodded. Then he said, "Where do you live?" I said, "I live in Madison with my husband and my daughter." He said, "I know that, but I mean where else?" I said, "I know that, but I mean where else?" I said, "Here too, whenever I can, whenever you'll have me." He stood up. He hugged me. He held on for a long time. He smelled like the aftershave he has used since I was a child, the cheap one in the green bottle that you can only find at one drugstore in Eau Claire. And I thought, I'm going to drive over to that drugstore next week and I'm going to buy 6 bottles. And I'm going to keep them in the cabinet here so he never runs out. That night, I cooked the oysters. My mother had never had one. She tried one and made a face and laughed and said, "I'm sorry, honey. That is the worst thing I have ever put in my mouth." And we all laughed. And my father ate 7 of them and made my mother eat a piece of bread to get the taste out. And we sat on the porch with the citronella candles burning and the lake going pink and then orange and then dark. And my mother said very quietly, "I never thought I'd have this." I said, "You have it." She said, "I'm so sorry." I said, "Don't." She said, "I'm so sorry." I said, "Don't." She said, "I should have stopped her years ago." I let her. I said, "Mom, don't. Tonight we eat oysters. Tomorrow we can talk about it, but tonight is for the lake." She nodded. My father said, "Look." We looked. Across the water in the trees on the far shore, a single light had come on. A neighbor's cabin. The light reflected on the lake in a long, broken line of gold. My father said, "I've wanted to see something like that my whole life." I drove back to Madison the next morning. My parents stayed. They are still there as I tell you this. My mother sends me photographs of birds she doesn't know the names of, and my husband, who is a casual birder, looks them up and texts her back. My father has rebuilt the wooden bench in the mudroom because he didn't like the way the old one creaked. He sent me a video of his work, and he was so proud. And I cried in my car in the Target parking lot. I haven't spoken to my sister since that day. I don't know if I ever will. I don't think about it as a decision I'm making. I think about it as a fact, like a season. Some things just are. My nephew, the oldest one, called me 3 weeks ago. He's 15. He said, "Aunt, I heard there's a house up north." I said, "There is." He said, "Could I see it sometime?" "With Grandpa?" I said, "Yes, you can. Call your grandfather. He's the one who invites people." He called my father that night. He's going up next month for a long weekend, just him and my dad. My dad is going to teach him to fish. I don't know if he'll be like his mother. I hope he won't be. I think he won't be. He called me first, which is more than she has done in 15 years. People ask me sometimes if I regret it. The trust, the papers, the years of paying taxes on a parcel I didn't own, the legal fees, the cold calculation of it when she is, after all, my only sister. I tell them this. Love without protection is not love. It is hope. And hope is a beautiful thing, and I have a great deal of it, but it is not a roof. It is not a fence. It is not a deed. My grandfather built a fence for my grandmother. My father didn't build one, and his sister took things from him for 40 years that he never got back. I built one for my mother and father, and I built it before there was anything to put behind it, because that's the only time a fence really works, before you need it. A boundary is not a punishment. A boundary is the shape of the thing you love. It is what tells the world, this here is the thing I will protect. The lake is still there. The loons are still nesting. My father watches the light change on the water in the evenings, and he does not have to be anywhere else, ever again. That, in the end, is what the money was for. I think about that morning more than I should. Not the confrontation. That part is easy to remember because it was clean, and clean things stay clean in your memory. I think about the years before, the 15 years of paying taxes on a parcel of land I didn't own yet, just so the paper trail would be there if I ever needed it. The legal fees I paid in 2009, when there was nothing to protect except a feeling I had about my sister. My husband used to call it my long game, and I used to laugh, but I wasn't really laughing. Here's what I've learned, and I'll say it plain because nobody said it plain to me when I was 25 and starting out. Every cruel thing that happens in a family was built brick by people who didn't want to see the wall going up. My sister didn't become who she is in a single afternoon. She became who she is because the first time she took something that wasn't hers, somebody said, well, she was always close to her. And the second time, somebody said, she's going through a hard time. And the 100th time, nobody said anything at all. Because by then the brick was the wall, and the wall was the house, and the house was just how things were. What I did with that trust wasn't revenge. I want to be careful about that because the internet loves a revenge story, and this isn't one. Revenge is about hurting someone back. What I did was about making sure my mother could sleep at night and my father could watch the loons come in at dusk without wondering when the next phone call was going to take it from him. That's not revenge. That's just architecture. The hardest part of becoming a person who protects what she loves is accepting that some of the people you love will hate you for it. My sister will tell a version of this story to anyone who will listen, and in her version, I am cold and calculating and I locked her out of our parents' lives over a misunderstanding. She believes that version. She has to. The other version would require her to look at herself, and she has been avoiding that mirror for 40 years. I don't think you build a good life by being soft about everything. I think you build a good life by being soft about the right things and hard about the right things, and learning, slowly and with a lot of mistakes, which is which. Be soft with the people who love you back. Be soft with strangers who are having a worse day than you are. Be soft with your parents when they're scared and don't know how to say it. But be hard about the perimeter. Be hard about what you will and will not allow on the land you've worked for. Hard isn't cruel. Hard is just honest. My father is teaching my nephew to fish next weekend. The boy called first. That matters. That's how you know a fence is working. The people who are supposed to come through the gate do.